She didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She didn't even let her face change. She just pressed one hand against her stomach, quietly, instinctively, and watched the man she loved place a crown on her sister's head. And right there, in that torchlit courtyard, with the full moon burning overhead like a witness and the entire pack cheering around her, Amelia Jackson made the only decision that would save her children's lives. She decided to disappear. What no one in that crowd knew, what Noah didn't know, was that the woman walking away from the edges of that ceremony wasn't just leaving. She was taking the future of his bloodline with her. And she was never, ever coming back. At least, that was the plan. The cold open you just witnessed? That moment frozen in torchlight. Amelia at the edge of the crowd, her dress torn from an afternoon of garden work, her stomach still flat enough that no one had noticed yet, her eyes dry because she had already decided that tears were a luxury she could no longer afford. That moment was not the beginning. It was the end of everything that came before it. To understand what it cost Amelia Jackson to walk away that night, you have to understand what Blackthorn Keep meant to her. Not as a symbol, not as a political seat, but as the only home she had ever known. She had grown up inside those moss-covered stone walls in western Massachusetts, not as a noble's daughter, not as a future queen, but as the child of the pack's head groundskeeper. Her father had tended the keep's ancient gardens for 30 years. Her mother had died when Amelia was 6, a fever in February, the kind that takes people in the night without ceremony. And so Amelia had inherited her mother's quietness and her father's loyalty to the stones. And she had grown up belonging to Blackthorn the way old trees belong to the land they grow from. Completely, rootedly, without any illusion that the land belonged to her in return. She knew every shadow in the eastern corridor. She knew which flagstones were loose in the lower courtyard and which torch brackets were rusted enough to sway in a strong wind. She knew the smell of the library after rain, old leather and cedar and something indefinably ancient, because she had spent more hours in that library than anywhere else on earth. That was where she met Noah Lucas. She had been 17, soaked to the skin from an afternoon downpour that had caught her in the gardens without warning. She had ducked into the Eastern Library not because she was permitted there. Technically, the library was restricted to pack leadership and their families, but because she had been desperate and the door had been unlocked, and Amelia had always believed that an unlocked door was the universe's way of extending an invitation. He had been sitting at the long oak table at the far end of the room, surrounded by governance documents that he was clearly not reading, staring instead at the rain hammering the tall windows. He was 18. Already carrying the posture of someone being slowly pressed beneath the weight of expectation. Shoulders slightly forward, jaw tight, eyes older than they should have been for a boy still technically a year from manhood. He had looked up when she came in. She had looked back at him, water dripping from her hair onto the stone floor, and said with absolutely no deference, "I'll leave when the rain stops." Not my lord. Not I'm sorry for intruding. Not any of the 30 appropriate things she could have said to the future Alpha King of the Massachusetts Highland Pack. Just that. And Noah Lucas, who had been surrounded by careful people his entire life. People who measured every word around him, who angled every sentence toward his approval, had stared at this soaking wet groundskeeper's daughter for a long moment. And then he had laughed. Not politely. Not performatively. A real laugh. The kind that surprised the person laughing as much as anyone else in the room. He had pushed one of the governance documents aside, leaned back in his chair, and said, "There's a blanket in the cabinet by the window." That was how it started. For 2 years after that, they existed in the careful, electric tension of something that neither of them named aloud. Stolen hours in the library during storms became a ritual. Conversations that began about books became conversations about everything. He told her things about the pressure of his inheritance that he had never told anyone in his inner circle, because she had no stake in any of it, and he had learned early that the most honest conversations happen with people who have nothing to gain from your honesty. She told him about her mother, about the specific grief of losing someone before you were old enough to properly remember them, and how that grief doesn't diminish with time, it just changes shape. He had listened in a way that she had not experienced before from anyone, fully, without waiting for his turn to speak. The pack noticed. The elders clucked. His father's advisors exchanged long, meaningful looks at packed dinners when Noah's eyes tracked to the edges of the room where Amelia stood. But nothing was ever said directly. Because nothing had happened, not technically. Not yet. And then his father died. The old Alpha King went quickly, which was how he would have wanted it. A man like that would have chosen a sudden ending over a slow diminishment every time. He was gone within a week of the diagnosis, and Noah Lucas ascended the throne at 20 years old, and the careful private world that he and Amelia had been quietly building in the Eastern Library became, overnight, a political liability. An Alpha King needed a queen. The elders convened within 48 hours of the coronation. The allied pacts were already sending inquiries. The question was not whether Noah would take a queen. It was simply when and who, and those were questions that the pact's leadership considered well above the pay grade of a groundskeeper's daughter. Amelia understood all of this. She understood it the way you understand something that is completely rational and completely devastating at the same time, with her mind in full agreement and her chest in full revolt. What she did not understand, what she could not have predicted, was her sister. Welcome back to the channel, my dear friends. Before we jump further into the story, please take a moment to subscribe, give this video a like, and tell me in the comments which country you're watching from. Your support means the world to me and helps me bring you even more exciting stories. Believe me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's dive into the story. Amelia had found out about the courtship the same way she found out about most things that happened in the keep's upper circles. Late, indirectly, and with the specific cold shock of news that you somehow already knew was coming but were not prepared to receive anyway. A kitchen worker had mentioned it. "Isn't it wonderful about your sister and the Alpha King?" said with genuine warmth, completely unaware that the words were landing like stones into still water. Amelia had smiled and agreed that yes, it was wonderful. She had gone back to the groundskeeper's cottage that evening, sat down at the small kitchen table, and tried to feel something other than the specific numbness that follows a wound that is too clean to bleed immediately. 3 days later, she had taken the private medical test. 3 days after that was the coronation ceremony. She hadn't planned to be in the courtyard that evening. The announcement had been moved without the lower staff being informed, a detail that no one in the leadership circle would have considered relevant to communicate downward. Amelia had been finishing the late-season trim on the climbing roses along the south wall when the crowd began gathering, when the torches were lit, when the musicians took their positions. She had stood at the very edge of the assembled pack, her gardening gloves still tucked in her belt, a streak of soil along her left forearm, her white work dress carrying the stains of an honest day's labor. And she had watched Noah Lucas, tall, armored, wearing the weight of his crown like a man who has accepted a sentence, place the black iron circlet on her sister's head. Serena had smiled up at him. Noah had not looked at the edges of the crowd. Amelia's hand had pressed against her stomach. Flat, unrevealing, 8 weeks along, carrying 2 lives that the man on that dais knew nothing about. 2 lives that would carry his blood, his legacy, the continuation of everything he had just been crowned to protect. She stood there for exactly 47 seconds after the crown was placed. She counted. Then she turned and walked back toward the groundskeeper's cottage. She packed 1 bag. She took the emergency money she had saved over 3 years of working the keep's grounds. Not much, but enough. She took her mother's photograph. She left everything else. She wrote a letter to Noah. She sat at the kitchen table for 20 minutes, pen in hand, and then she folded the blank page and put it in her pocket and walked out the door. Some things, she had decided, were better left unsaid than said wrong. She moved through the Massachusetts darkness like a woman who had already grieved the life she was leaving. North along the forest roads, then east, then northeast toward the coast. She moved carefully, deliberately, shedding any trail that could be followed. She changed her name in the small coastal town where she finally stopped. Not legally, at first, just practically, the way a person can when they exist at the margins of a community's attention. She found a cottage outside of Gloucester that smelled of salt and old timber, and rented it from a landlord who asked no questions she wasn't prepared to answer. She found work at a coastal bakery, the kind of small, early morning labor that requires full physical attention and leaves little room for the kind of thinking that undoes a person. She made careful friends, a woman named Bridget who asked for nothing, a neighbor named Carl who minded his business with admirable consistency. She let her hair grow longer. She stopped flinching at sounds. She learned slowly how to exist in a life that had no architecture left from the old one. On a February night when the frost came in so thick the cottage windows turned white, Amelia Jackson gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl, in the upstairs bedroom of that Gloucester cottage, with Bridget holding her hand and the wind off the Atlantic pressing against the walls like it wanted in. She named the boy Eli. She named the girl Rose. She held them both against her chest in the gray pre-dawn quiet, one arm around each, their heartbeats impossibly small and impossibly loud against her own. "He will never find you," she told them. "I promise." It was the most important promise she had ever made. And for 4 years she kept it. But here is the thing about promises made to protect people from powerful men who have every resource in the world and nothing left to lose. They are only as strong as the secrets they depend on. And somewhere back in western Massachusetts, in the ancient stone corridors of Blackthorn Keep, Noah Lucas had just found the first thread. What would you have done in Amelia's position that night? Would you have told him, or would you have walked away? Drop your answer in the comments. This story is about to go somewhere none of them are ready for. For years of silence, for years of salt air and early mornings and the specific, hard-won piece of a woman who has rebuilt herself from nothing. For years of watching Eli learn to walk on the cottage's uneven kitchen floor, of watching Rose develop her father's exact jawline and her mother's exact stubbornness, of waking up every morning in a life that was small and quiet and entirely, completely hers. For years. And it ended on a Tuesday. Not dramatically. Not with wolves at the door or black SUVs in the driveway, or any of the scenarios Amelia had rehearsed in her head during the first anxious year of her disappearance, when she had still been sleeping lightly and keeping a packed bag under the bed. It ended the way most dangerous things end. Quietly, without warning, with something so ordinary that she almost missed it. She was behind the counter at the bakery when she saw the man. He was sitting at one of the small tables near the window, nursing a coffee he hadn't ordered from the counter, wearing clothes that were too good for Gloucester without being obviously expensive. The particular kind of expensive that knows how to dress itself down. He had a newspaper open in front of him, but he had not turned a page in 20 minutes. Amelia knew this because she had been watching him since he sat down, with the specific peripheral attention of a woman who had spent 4 years keeping one eye on every room she walked into. He was not looking at her. That was what worried her most. People who are not looking at you with that much deliberate effort are always looking at you. She finished her shift without incident. She walked home the long way, through the Harbor Road, doubling back along the residential streets, the route she had mentally designated years ago as her check route, the one that made surveillance obvious if it existed. She saw nothing. No one following. No unfamiliar cars parked on her street. She told herself she was being paranoid. She almost believed it. But that night, after Eli and Rose were asleep, Rose with her arm flung over her head the way she always slept, Eli curled tight on his side with his fist under his chin. Amelia sat at the kitchen table and opened the drawer where she kept the things she never looked at. Her father's old pack identification card, a photograph of Blackthorn Keep in summer, which she kept not out of sentiment, but out of the particular discipline of never letting yourself forget what you were running from. And the letter, the one she had written to Noah and never sent, the page that was actually blank, folded in thirds, which she had kept as a reminder of the choice she had made and why. She held the blank letter for a long moment. Then she put everything back in the drawer, closed it, and went to check the locks on all 3 doors. Back in western Massachusetts, Noah Lucas had not slept properly in 4 years. This was not something he said out loud. It was not something he admitted to his council, his generals, or the woman who wore his crown and shared his keep and had, in the years since the coronation, proven herself an efficient and politically capable queen in every way that could be measured on a governance ledger. Serena ran the pack's social alliances with the precision of a chess player. She attended every required function, said every required thing, and smiled at Noah in public with the warm, practiced confidence of a woman who had exactly what she had always intended to have. In private, they were polite. Polite in the specific way of two people who have an arrangement and are both intelligent enough to understand that arrangements are not love, but are sometimes, in certain kinds of lives, the closest available substitute. Noah did not blame Serena for this. He blamed himself entirely and with the particular thoroughness of a man who has replayed a specific moment thousands of times and arrived at the same conclusion every single time. He had made a choice, and the choice had been wrong, and the cost of that wrong choice had walked away from the edges of a torchlit courtyard on an October night 4 years ago and had not been seen since. Amelia Jackson. Her name lived in the back of his throat like something he was constantly on the verge of saying. He had searched. Quietly at first, a few trusted lieutenants, discreet inquiries, careful asks through channels that didn't connect back to the Alpha King's office. He had told himself it was concern, that he owed her that much, that she had been a presence in his life for years, and she had simply vanished, and any decent person would want to know she was safe. But the truth he turned away from in the daylight hours and was ambushed by at 3 a.m, was simpler and more devastating than concern. He had made the wrong choice. He had known it at the moment he made it, on some level that the correct, dutiful, politically responsible part of his brain had immediately set about suppressing. He had stood in that courtyard with a crown in his hands, and he had known, with the animal certainty that bypasses rational thought entirely, that the woman he was about to crown was not the woman he was supposed to be crowning. But the elders had approved. The alliances were secured. The pack needed stability. His father was barely cold. So he had placed the crown. And Amelia had walked away. And he had spent 4 years trying to find her, and 4 years trying to convince himself that finding her was about responsibility rather than the specific, unbearable ache of a man who had chosen duty over the one thing that had ever made him feel like a person rather than a position. The first real lead came from a place he had not expected. His father's old personal secretary, a meticulous, elderly man named Howard, who had served the Lucas pack for 40 years and who Noah had inherited along with the throne, had retired 8 months ago and moved to a coastal property north of Boston. He had sent Noah a retirement letter that was formal and brief and entirely appropriate. And then 6 weeks later, he had sent a second letter. This one was not formal. "My lord," it read, "I am aware that you have been searching for the groundskeeper's younger daughter, Amelia, for some time. I did not feel it was my place to speak on this matter while I was still in service. I hope you will understand that what I am about to tell you I am telling you not because I believe it is my right to do so, but because I have come to believe that silence, in this case, is its own form of harm. I was at the harbor in Gloucester 3 weeks ago visiting my sister. I saw a young woman working at a bakery on Harbor Street. She was using a different name. But I have known Amelia Jackson since she was 4 years old, my lord, and I know her face. I could be wrong. I am not wrong." Noah had read the letter 4 times. Then he had folded it, put it in his jacket pocket, told Serena he had packed business on the coast, and driven to Gloucester himself. He had not sent scouts. He had not sent lieutenants. He had gone alone, in a car that was not registered to his name, because some things he had understood in the marrow of his bones as he read Howard's letter. Some things you have to face yourself. That had been 4 days ago. He had found the bakery on Harbor Street without difficulty. He had sat at the window table with a coffee he didn't taste and had watched the woman behind the counter with a controlled, careful, absolutely devastating recognition that he had locked behind his face through what felt like a supreme act of physical will. It was her. For years had not changed her the way he had feared. She was older. Not in a way that diminished her, but in a way that completed her. The way a face settles into itself when the person inhabiting it has made peace with something difficult. Her hair was longer. She moved with a calm, deliberate efficiency that was different from the slightly guarded girl he had known in the library, different in the way that a person who has survived something moves, not shrunken, but quiet in a new way. Settled. She had not seen him, or she had chosen not to show that she had seen him, which amounted to the same practical outcome. He had left before the end of her shift. And then he had done what he had come to do before he allowed himself to react to any of it. He had watched the town. Quietly. For 4 days. The Harbor Street Bakery. Her route home. The small cottage on the residential street 3 blocks from the water. The woman she talked to, Bridget, clearly a friend of some standing. The landlord who collected rent on the first of the month. And the children. He had seen them on the second day, through the cottage window. Not in a surveilling way, not deliberately, but because the curtains had been open on the ground floor, and he had been walking past, and the kitchen light had been on, and there they were. Two small figures at a kitchen table, doing what appeared to be drawings, their heads bent together over the paper in the easy, unconscious physical closeness of children who have grown up in each other's company. A boy and a girl, both dark-haired. The boy had his mouth. Noah had registered this with a sensation like cold water down the back of his neck. The precise set of the jaw, the particular angle of the nose that his own mother had pointed out in his baby photographs with proud, laughing certainty. He had stood on the pavement outside that cottage window for approximately 12 seconds before he made himself walk on. 12 seconds was all it took for everything he had understood about his life to reorganize itself around a new and irrefutable center of gravity. He had children. Amelia had been pregnant when she left. Amelia had been pregnant and she had not told him, and she had disappeared, and she had raised his children alone in a salt-wind cottage in Gloucester for 4 years, and he had not known, and she had not told him, and she had not told him. He had sat in his car on the harbor road for a long time after that. Not angry. Not yet. The anger would come later, in waves, and he would have to decide what to do with it, and that would be its own reckoning. But in that moment on the harbor road, with the Atlantic gray and restless beyond the seawall, and the evening coming down around him, what Noah Lucas felt was something closer to grief than fury. Grief for 4 years. For a boy learning to walk without him. For a girl growing his jawline into her own face without him ever having been there to see it happen. For every ordinary, unremarkable, irreplaceable moment of those children's lives that he had been absent from. Not by choice, he told himself, but also not entirely without choice. He had made the choices that had led to Amelia leaving. That chain of causality was his to own. He had driven back to his rented room. He had not slept. By morning, he had made 3 decisions. First, he was going to talk to Amelia Jackson directly and alone before he did anything else or involved anyone else. Whatever came after that conversation would be determined by the conversation. But she deserved to know he had found her before she found out some other, worse way. Second, whatever he had with Serena, that careful, polite arrangement that wore the costume of a marriage, was finished. It had been finished for 4 years. He had simply been too cowardly, too bound by duty and appearance, to name it out loud. That cowardice ended now. Third, and this one he was least certain of but most resolved about, he was going to fight for those children. Not take them. Not use the Alpha King's authority to claim what biology entitled him to claim. Fight for them, in whatever way Amelia needed him to fight, on whatever terms she set, with whatever patience and proof she required. Because they were his. And they were hers. And somewhere between those 2 facts was a path that he intended to find no matter how long it took or how much it cost him. He got up. He dressed. He drove to Harbor Street. The bakery opened at 6. He was there at 5:58, sitting at the window table, his coffee cooling in front of him, watching the door to the back kitchen. At 6:04, Amelia came through it. She saw him immediately. He watched her see him. Watched the specific sequence of emotions move through her face in the space of about 2 seconds. Recognition, shock, calculation, and then the hard, deliberate composure of a woman who has trained herself to function in emergencies. She did not drop the tray she was carrying. She set it down on the counter with complete steadiness, said something brief to her colleague, and walked to the front of the bakery. She stopped at the edge of his table. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The last time they had been in the same room, she had been standing at the edge of a torchlit courtyard watching him crown her sister. That image existed between them now like a physical object, like something that would have to be moved before either of them could get to anything else. It was Amelia who spoke first. Her voice was quiet and controlled and entirely without surprise. The voice of someone who had been preparing for this conversation for 4 years, hoping it would never come and knowing on some level that it always would. "How long have you known?" she said. Not hello. Not what are you doing here. Not any of the civilian openings that normal people use when extraordinary situations require navigation. Just, how long have you known? Noah looked at her across the small table with the full weight of 4 years and 12 seconds of standing on a pavement outside a lit kitchen window. Long enough, he said quietly. Amelia. Not here. She said it quickly, low. Not now. Come back at 7:30. I'll have someone watch the... She stopped. Recalibrated. Come back at 7:30. We'll talk. She walked back to the counter without waiting for his answer. Noah watched her go. His coffee had gone completely cold. He left it on the table and walked back out into the Gloucester morning, and the Atlantic wind came off the water and hit him full in the face, and somewhere 3 blocks away in a small cottage his children were waking up, and he had no idea what they sounded like in the morning, what they called for, what they needed. 7:30 felt like a very long time away, and in the cottage on the residential street, Amelia was already texting Bridget. I need you to take the kids today. All day. Don't ask me why yet. Please. 3 dots appeared. Then already on it. You okay? Amelia looked up from her phone. Through the bakery window, she could see the spot where Noah's car had been. It was gone now. Just an empty stretch of Harbor Road and the gray Atlantic beyond it. No, she typed back. Then she deleted it and wrote, I will be. She put the phone in her apron pocket. Her hands were not shaking. She was very proud of her hands for not shaking. But the 7:30 conversation that was coming was going to be one of the most important of her entire life. And there was something else. Something that Noah didn't know yet. Something that even 4 years of searching hadn't turned up. That was going to make everything he thought he had figured out in the last 4 days suddenly, completely, and irrevocably more complicated. Because Noah Lucas hadn't just found Amelia. In finding Amelia, he had also, without knowing it, without meaning to, without any of the discretion he had intended, left a trail. And someone else had been following it. 7:30 came like a held breath finally released. Amelia had changed out of her work apron. She was wearing the gray sweater she saved for days that required armor, soft on the outside, nothing giving away the person inside it. She had made tea. 2 cups, which she recognized as muscle memory from 100 library afternoons and immediately resented herself for. She left 1 cup on the counter and stood at the kitchen window instead, watching the street, her own cup warm between her palms, until she saw his car. He knocked. She opened the door before the second knock. For a moment they simply looked at each other on the threshold. The alpha king of the Massachusetts Highland Pack and the groundskeeper's daughter in her gray sweater, with all of 4 years and one very large silence between them. Come in, she said. He came in. He was careful about it, she noticed, careful in the way of a man who understands that the space he's entering is not his, has never been his, and that the person who made it is the one with authority here regardless of what titles he carries outside the door. He sat at the kitchen table when she gestured to a chair. He did not look around the cottage with the assessing eyes of ownership. He looked at her. I didn't tell anyone I was coming here, he said first. No counsel. No lieutenants. No one knows I'm in Gloucester except Howard, and Howard will carry it to his grave. I know, Amelia said. I would have known before now if you'd sent people. A pause. Something moved behind his eyes, recognition, or something close to it. You've been watching for that. For 4 years, she said. Yes. The words landed in the room and stayed there. He didn't flinch from them, which she had not expected and which cost her something, that small failure of her expectations. I owe you an apology, he said. Not a political one. Not a performative one. An actual one for an actual wrong. I made choices that, he stopped. Restarted. I was a coward. I had everything I needed to make a different decision, and I made the wrong one anyway, because the wrong one was easier, and I have spent 4 years knowing it and not knowing how to reach you to say so. Amelia set her cup down. I know why you're here, she said. You saw them. Yes. How much do you know? I know there are 2 of them. I know they're mine. His voice was steady, but she could hear what it was costing him to keep it that way. I know I've missed 4 years. I know that is my fault, not yours. And I know that I have no right to walk in here and make demands or issue claims or behave like the alpha king. Because in this kitchen, in this conversation, I'm just a man who made a terrible mistake and is asking for the chance to begin making it right. The silence that followed was the longest of either of their lives. Amelia looked at him for a long time. The way she had looked at him in the library all those years ago, when they were two young people in a rainstorm with nothing between them but honesty and an unlocked door. He met her eyes and did not look away. "Their names are Eli and Rose," she said finally. "Eli is cautious and curious, and he loves maps. Rose is fearless and funny, and she already argues like a lawyer." Something crossed her face, not quite a smile, but its close neighbor. "She has your jaw." "I know," he said quietly. "I saw. They don't know about you. They know they have a father who doesn't live with us. They have not asked many questions yet, but they will. Therefore, what will you tell them?" "That depends," she said, "entirely on what you do next." Noah leaned forward, both hands flat on the table, the gesture of a man making himself as readable as possible, removing every hidden card. "I want to know them," he said. "That's all. I want to know them, and I want them to know me, and I will do that on whatever terms you set, in whatever form you decide is safest for them. I'm not here to take anything. I'm not here to weaponize the Alpha King's authority. I am here because they are my children and you are." He stopped again, looked at her with an honesty that she had not seen from another human being in 4 years. "Because you are the person I should have chosen. And I didn't. And I have to live with that. But I would like very much not to waste whatever time we have left being apart from the people I should have been beside all along." Amelia's hands were very still on the table. She had prepared for anger. She had prepared for demands, for the cold language of paternity and pack law, for the weight of his title pressing down on her small kitchen. She had not prepared for this, for a man who had arrived with all the power in the room and was deliberately, carefully refusing to use it. She opened her mouth to answer. And then her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Bridget. She answered it, because Bridget had the children and Bridget only called when something required calling about. "Bridget. Amelia." Bridget's voice was controlled in the particular way of someone who is frightened and not letting themselves be. "The kids are fine. They're right here with me. But there's a car that's been parked at the end of my street for 2 hours. Dark sedan. Massachusetts plates. I noticed it because it was there when we arrived and it's still there now, and the man inside it has not moved and has not looked at his phone or done anything that a normal person waiting in a car does." The cold that moved through Amelia then had nothing to do with the season. She looked at Noah. He had read her face. He was already standing. "Bridget," Amelia said, "take the children inside and lock the door. Don't go near the windows. I'll be there in 10 minutes. She ended the call. "Someone followed you," she said to Noah. It was not an accusation. It was a statement of operational fact, delivered in the calm, flat voice of a woman who has spent 4 years preparing for exactly this kind of emergency. "I was careful," he said. "You were careful for a man traveling alone who didn't know he was being followed. That's different from actually not being followed." She was already moving, keys from the hook by the door, jacket from the back of the chair. "Who would have reason to track your movements without your knowledge?" Noah's expression changed. "Serena," he said. The name fell into the room like a match dropped into dry paper. "Tell me," Amelia said. "She has known for years that I was looking for you." She never said so directly. But Serena is not a woman who misses things, and I was not as subtle as I thought I was. And she has had for years to wonder what it would mean for her position if I ever found you. He was already at the door. If she sent someone, then she already knows about the children, Amelia finished. Or she's about to. They looked at each other. "My car is faster," he said. Amelia grabbed her jacket. "Then drive," she said. The drive to Bridget's took 8 minutes. They did not speak. Noah drove with the focused, contained urgency of a man who has been in genuine emergencies before. Not fast enough to attract attention, fast enough to matter. Amelia sat in the passenger seat with her phone in her hand and her eyes on the side mirror and a specific, sharp clarity in her chest that she recognized as the kind of calm that only arrives when a thing you've been afraid of for years finally shows its actual face and you discover you are more prepared than you feared. The dark sedan was still there when they turned onto Bridget's street. Noah drove past it without slowing. In her peripheral vision, Amelia catalogued. One occupant, male, mid-40s, watching Bridget's house with the professional stillness of someone who has done this kind of work before. He clocked Noah's car. He did not move. "He's reporting in," Noah said. "He's already reported in." Amelia kept her voice level. The question is who he reported to and what they'll do with it. Noah parked 2 streets over. They walked back through the residential lanes in the November cold, cutting through a side alley to approach Bridget's house from the rear garden rather than the street. Bridget answered the back door before they knocked. She had been watching from the kitchen window. She was a compact, steady woman in her 40s who had survived a divorce, a flooded basement, and 3 Massachusetts winters with equal composure. And she looked at Amelia and at the man standing behind her with the frank, assessing gaze of someone processing new information in real time. The children, Amelia said. Living room. Watching something loud about dinosaurs. Bridget's eyes moved to Noah. You must be the reason for the packed bag under the bed. Bridget, Amelia said. I'm not being judgmental. I'm being accurate. She stepped back to let them in. The living room. Eli and Rose on the floor in front of the television, surrounded by an arrangement of stuffed animals organized with what appeared to be serious architectural intention. They looked up when the door opened. Rose scrambled to her feet. Eli stayed where he was, but his eyes moved immediately to Noah, with the particular, measuring attention of a child who has absorbed his mother's habit of reading rooms. Mama, Rose said, and crossed the room and wrapped both arms around Amelia's legs with the compact, total confidence of a child who has never had reason to doubt her welcome. Amelia held her, one hand in her daughter's hair, her eyes on her son. Hey, sweetheart. Steady. Warm. Not a single tremor. Are you okay? We saw dinosaurs, Rose informed her. The big ones. The big ones are the best ones. Eli had not moved. He was looking at Noah with the careful, unblinking attention of a child trying to solve a problem he doesn't have all the pieces for yet. Noah stood very still in the doorway. He did not crouch down to seem less imposing, did not perform warmth, did not do any of the things that adults do when they are nervous around children and trying to manage the situation. He simply stood there and let the boy look. After a long moment, Eli said, You have the same nose as me. The room was very quiet. I do, Noah said. Another pause. Are you my dad? Amelia's hand tightened slightly in Rose's hair. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times, and in none of the rehearsals had it gone like this. So direct, so clear, her 4-year-old son cutting through every layer of complexity with the uncomplicated precision that children sometimes achieve and adults spend their whole lives trying to recapture. She looked at Noah. He was looking at her, asking. She gave the smallest nod. Noah looked back at Eli. He crossed the room slowly and crouched down to the boy's level. Not performing, not managing, just making himself equal. Yes, he said. I am. Eli considered this for a moment with the gravity of someone reviewing a significant piece of data. Okay, he said finally. Do you know about maps? Something moved through Noah's face that Amelia had no name for and had never seen there before. A lot about maps, he said. I have some very good ones. Good, said Eli. Come see mine. He stood up, took Noah's hand with the matter-of-fact ease of a child who has decided a thing and sees no further reason for deliberation, and led him to the corner of the living room where a large hand-drawn map of what appeared to be a coastal territory was spread across the floorboards. Rose watched this with her mother's eyes, those careful, cataloging eyes that missed nothing. Is he staying? She asked. Amelia looked at her daughter, at the jaw that was her own and the brow that was his and the specific, searching directness that was entirely, originally Rose. I don't know yet, she said honestly. But he's here right now. Rose appeared to find this satisfactory. She returned to her dinosaurs. The sedan was gone when Noah checked the street an hour later. This was not reassuring. A surveillance operative who pulls away is either done or reporting. Given the timing, Noah had a very clear sense of which. He called his most trusted lieutenant, a man named Marcus who had served him for 7 years and whom he trusted with everything except, apparently, the knowledge that he was in Gloucester, from the back garden, away from the children's hearing. I need to know if Serena deployed anyone on the coast this week, he said. Quietly. Off the books. A pause. My lord, is this a secure line? Marcus. Another pause. Then, I'll have an answer within the hour. The answer came in 40 minutes. It came not from Marcus, but from Marcus reading aloud a message that had arrived 30 minutes earlier at the Alpha King's official residence. A message from Serena herself, addressed to Noah and marked urgent, which Marcus had opened per standing protocol in the Alpha King's absence. It read, "I know where you are and I know why. I know what you found. I want you to understand that I have no intention of fighting this. Not for you, not for a title, not for any of it. I never wanted a man who didn't want me back. I want only one thing in return for my cooperation, and that thing is a conversation, face to face, before any of this becomes official. Come home and talk to me. Then do whatever it is you need to do. S." Noah stood in Bridget's back garden with the Atlantic wind in his face and read the message twice. Then he went back inside. Amelia was at the kitchen table with Bridget, the children's voices audible from the living room. She looked up when he came in. She read his face. "What?" she said. He handed her his phone. She read the message. Her expression did not change, but he had learned years ago how to read the stillness that substituted for expression in a person who has trained themselves not to show things, and what he read now was something complicated. Relief, wariness, and something else underneath both of them that he thought might be the beginning of a question she wasn't sure she had the right to ask. She handed the phone back. "She's letting you go," she said. "Apparently. Do you trust it?" "I think," he said carefully, "that Serena has always been many things, but she has never been someone who fights battles she's already conceded. She knew when she wrote that message. She's known for a while, probably." He paused. "The surveillance wasn't to stop me. It was to confirm what she suspected so she'd know the terms she was negotiating from." Amelia was quiet for a moment. "She's not what I spent 4 years being afraid of," she said. "No, she's not." He met her eyes. "I owe her a conversation. And then I need to come back here." The word here sat in the room. Amelia looked at him for a long time. "The children need consistency," she said finally. "They need someone who shows up. Not a figure. Not a title. Not once a month and then gone. Someone who is actually reliably in their lives." "I know. I'm not talking about me," she said. "I'm talking about them." "I know," he said again. "I'm talking about all 3 of you." From the living room, Eli's voice rose with the specific authority of a child narrating a map. "And this is the Eastern Territory, and this is where the harbor is, and this is where we live." Both of them turned toward the sound. For a moment, they simply listened to their son explaining the world to his father. Amelia set her cup down. "Go have your conversation," she said. "And then come back." It was the closest she had come in 4 years to an open door. Noah recognized it. He intended, this time, not to let it close. The conversation with Serena took place the following morning, in the Alpha King's study at Blackthorn Keep, with both of them sitting on opposite sides of the fire rather than the desk. Her choice, which Noah recognized as deliberate and which he honored. Serena looked, as she always looked, completely composed. She had poured the tea herself, which was domestic and unusually intimate for a woman who did not traffic in informality, and she held her cup with both hands the way she only ever did when she was being honest rather than strategic. "I knew," she said, "when you started searching for her, that it was a matter of time. I told myself it wasn't. I was fairly convincing." She paused. "I'm good at convincing myself of things. I imagine you've noticed." "Serena, I don't want your apology," she said. Not unkindly. "I want something else." "Name it." "An honest dissolution. A proper legal separation, conducted through the Pack Council, without the kind of performance that turns a woman into either a villain or a victim for public consumption." Her eyes were steady and entirely clear. "I did what I set out to do. I was a capable queen. The alliances I built are real and will serve this pack for decades. I would like that on record, plainly, before anything else is." "It will be," Noah said. "And the children." Something moved in her face. Not maternal, not quite, but something closer to the abstract acknowledgement of an injustice she had been part of without having intended to be. "They should know their father. Whatever I think of how we arrived here, they should know their father." "I know. Then we understand each other." She set her cup down. "I'll have my legal representative contact the council this afternoon. I'd like it done quickly, if you don't mind. I have a great deal of life left to live, and I'd prefer not to spend it waiting for paperwork." Noah looked at the woman he had been married to for 4 years. This sharp, capable, ultimately lonely woman who had wanted a specific life and had built it with both hands and had, in the end, been wise enough to understand when it was finished. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not for the dissolution. For the years in between. You deserved better than a husband who was always half somewhere else." Serena considered this. "Yes," she said. "I did." She picked up her cup again. "Now go be somewhere fully, for once in your life." He was back in Gloucester by evening. He had called ahead. Amelia had given him her number when he left, which he had understood to be significant and had not made the mistake of treating as casual. He had texted from the road, "Coming back tonight. Is that all right?" The response had taken 11 minutes, which he had spent reading a great deal into. Then yes, "We'll be here." The cottage was lit from inside when he pulled onto the residential street, every window warm against the November dark. Through the kitchen window he could see the overhead light and the shapes of people moving, and he sat in the car for a moment and let himself absorb the specific, almost unbearable ordinariness of it. A lit house in the evening, with his children inside it. He knocked. Eli opened the door. He was wearing pajamas with small planets on them and holding a rolled-up piece of paper that was clearly a new map, and he looked up at Noah with the same direct, measuring gaze as the day before and said, without preamble, "I made you a copy of the Eastern Territory. In case you need to know where things are." "That's exactly what I need," Noah said. Eli handed it over with the gravity of someone completing a significant transaction, then turned and walked back into the cottage without ceremony. Noah followed him inside. The cottage smelled of something baking and of the particular warmth of a home that has been genuinely lived in. Rose was at the kitchen table doing what appeared to be a drawing of a very large animal with an improbable number of legs. Bridget was not there, just Amelia at the counter, her back to the door, turning when she heard him come in. She was wearing the gray sweater again. Her hair was loose. She looked at him in the doorway of her kitchen. The kitchen she had built, in the life she had built, from the wreckage of a night 4 years ago in a torchlit courtyard. And her expression was the most unguarded he had ever seen it. Not open, exactly. Not surrendered. But no longer defended. "How did it go?" she asked. "It's done. Or it will be legally within the month." He paused. She was more graceful about it than she had any obligation to be. Amelia nodded slowly. Something in her face acknowledged this. Not with warmth for Serena, but with the fair-minded recognition of a person who is capable of extending credit where it is due even when it is complicated. "Good," she said. "Sit down. There's stew." It was such a simple sentence. So completely devoid of ceremony. So entirely, precisely what the moment needed. Noah sat down at the kitchen table. Rose looked up from her drawing, appraised him, and slid a crayon across the table toward him with the air of someone extending a professional courtesy. "You can draw on the back," she said magnanimously. "If you want." "Thank you," he said. "I'm doing a megalodon," she explained. "It's a very big shark." "I can see that. The size is very accurate." Rose looked at him with sudden, brightened interest. "Do you know about sharks?" "Some. Eli only knows about maps," she confided, with the ruthless candor of a sibling. "Sharks are better." From across the room, without looking up from the Eastern Territory, Eli said, "Maps tell you where the sharks are." Rose considered this. "Okay," she conceded. "That's fair." At the counter, Amelia had her back turned again, but Noah could see her shoulders, and he could see that they were no longer held in the careful, permanent tension of a woman waiting for the other shoe to drop. They were simply her shoulders. Just the shoulders of a woman making stew, in her kitchen, on a November evening. He had been sitting at the table for perhaps 10 minutes when she set a bowl in front of him and then, instead of going back to the counter, sat down in the chair beside him. Not across the table. Beside him. He looked at her. She was looking at the children. "Eli drew 16 maps last week," she said quietly. "He's going to want to show you all of them." "I have time," Noah said. "He'll hold you to that." "Good." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "This is not simple. I want you to understand that I know this is not simple. There is a great deal we haven't talked about, and there are things I am still angry about, and those things don't disappear because tonight was easy." "I know. But," she paused. The word sat there, doing the work that small words sometimes have to do when large ones aren't enough. But I also know that I have been afraid for 4 years. And I am tired of being afraid. She looked at him then, directly, fully, with none of the guarded peripheral attention she had given him in the bakery, none of the calculated distance. Just her eyes. And I think Eli is going to keep you up past his bedtime with map talk, so you should probably know where the spare blankets are. It took Noah a full 3 seconds to understand what she was saying. When he did, something in him that had been braced for 4 solid years came quietly, finally, undone. "Where are the spare blankets?" he said. The corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile. The predecessor to one. Upstairs cabinet. Second shelf. She picked up her spoon. "Eli, come eat. You can explain the Western Territory after dinner." "The Western Territory has 3 subregions," Eli said immediately, already moving toward the table. "After dinner." "Fine." He climbed into his chair, looked at his father sitting beside his mother, and appeared to find this arrangement not only acceptable but obvious. The effortless acceptance of a child for whom the world is still, largely, what it should be. Rose had already started on her stew and was explaining unprompted the full taxonomy of prehistoric sea creatures to no one in particular. The cottage was warm. Outside, the Atlantic moved in the dark the way it always had, vast and indifferent and permanent, and the November wind pressed against the walls the way it had on the February night 4 years ago when 2 small heartbeats had arrived in an upstairs bedroom and a woman had made a promise she had kept at great cost. The promise had always been about safety. And safety, it turned out, did not always look the way you imagined it would when you were alone in the dark making promises to newborns. Sometimes it looked like a man sitting at a kitchen table eating stew with a child's crayon in his pocket and a hand-drawn map of the Eastern Territory on his knee. Sometimes it looked like 2 children arguing, affectionately and without resolution, about whether maps or sharks were more important. Sometimes it was not the absence of the thing you feared, but the presence of the thing you had stopped letting yourself want. Amelia sat at the table in her gray sweater in the warm kitchen and listened to her children and felt, for the first time in 4 years, the particular quality of quiet that is not the quiet of a woman waiting for danger. It was the quiet of a woman who has come home. Noah, beside her, said nothing. He had learned, years ago in a rain-soaked library, that the most honest moments don't require words. He simply reached across the table and turned Eli's map right side up. It had been upside down, and said, "Show me where we are." And his son leaned forward, serious and bright-eyed, and pointed. "Here," said Eli. "We're right here." If you enjoyed this video, kindly subscribe to this channel. Also, don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts in the comment section. Also, tap this video showing on your screen to see what happened in this werewolf fantasy story.